I got involved with the league because I was looking for an organization that could make a difference when it came to climate change and the environment. I saw that movement on making a more sustainable future could not be extricated from the intersection that politics, campaign finance, legislation, and voter education and rights acted upon it. And few organizations out there were actively addressing all of these topics from the neutral position of being nonpartisan, which, perhaps surprisingly or not, leads us to tonight's topic. While the League is nonpartisan and has been since its founding 103 years ago, we don't support or oppose any particular party or candidate. We do encourage our members to be politically active, and as a League, we conduct research studies and craft policy positions based on that research. And while we seek to educate the public to help them become more informed voters, we also advocate for social change that aligns with the positions we've developed with careful thought and consideration. Racism, discrimination, and bias also cannot be extricated from environmental sustainability, nor is their history in the South Bay separate from its modern moorings. There are historical reasons that children in Wilmington, who are mostly Black and brown, are at greater risk for cancer, autoimmune disorders, and asthma, and have no access to public schools that score higher on the 10-point scale beyond economics, unlike in Torrance, where most of our schools are above 5 on a 10-point scale. Some may surmise their own justifications for why there are so few Black families in local schools and neighborhoods. If they never learned, like I didn't, about redlining and land seizure, or with so few numbers, why they're so often pulled over by police. Having been born and raised in Torrance, I was ignorant into my high school years that the history I was being taught, even in the advanced classes, was taking care to avoid controversial topics that would have allowed me to question why things were the way that they were here. But we cannot hope to achieve change without addressing the very big elephant in the room. And we don't expect to do that in one night, just like the wise saying by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, eating an elephant can only be done one bite at a time, which we hope to do over the course of this series. Now, there may be some here tonight who don't believe we have racism in South Bay. I'm glad you came. If you'll take a moment, we are recording this event via Zoom, though we're not sharing the Zoom meeting, so we want to record it and make it better share with the public. But if you join the Zoom meeting, there is a poll in the Zoom that we'll be sharing as part of the Zoom meeting that would allow you to share your information with us. And I hope to share it out with everybody too, about any experiences you may have had, or if you've had experiences, and other information that if we would want to know about each other. So if you could take a moment, you can actually take a picture with your phone of the Zoom QR code there, and that way you'd be able to access the poll when I guess I would need to give you access to the poll just a minute. Admittedly, I didn't know about racism or discrimination in the South Bay. Hadn't been born and raised here until my friends who happened to be brown, especially in their late teens and mid-20s, were frequently and without cause pulled over and harassed by the police locally. And at the time, it was tempting to blame them for what was happening. Maybe it was what they were doing, how they were dressed, what did they do to capture attention. But then I witnessed it again and again, no matter what they were wearing, what they were driving, how they were driving, or the condition of their vehicle. And I witnessed how resigned they were as well, but their reality was just really different than mine due to the color of their skin. The phrase even was called being Black while driving, but it also occurs on bicycles and without too, like when shopping, walking, or jogging. Even in the face of adversity, we have so many people of color in our community to be grateful for, many of whom are here tonight, along with our first Black principal in Torrance, who is our keynote speaker, many of you came to hear, We also have the first Black president of the League of Coders, Carol Smith. This conversation has been a long time coming, and we're thankful to the leadership that has gotten us here. We also have with us our newest Torrance City Council member, Bridget Lewis. Now that we're addressing this topic, there's so much to discuss. It's a difficult topic just to discuss it all, and so many different perspectives about whether it exists, to what level, whether it can be addressed. Our hope tonight is to begin the journey with a simple acknowledgement that it exists, it's worthy of our attention, and our attempts to address it. So if you're not aware, the Torrance Police Department has requested an independent review of the police department by California's Attorney General to come review their policies and practices following allegations of a bias incident and the exchange of bigoted text messages among a number of Torrance PD officers. I'm happy to share that 2 representatives from the Attorney General's office, Civic and next one, are here tonight, and they will be providing opportunities over the next months for individuals with experiences to share their stories for inclusion as part of their review. They're not here to address any specific wrongs, but instead to capture a sense of the way things are and have been, and will have a formal report once they finish their investigation. They will not be quoting anyone or providing legal advice. They will be providing their information tonight to those who want to share. If you know others who are not here tonight that have their own stories, please take the information to share with them. You can know if Christina and Tanya would like to stand and just wave so people know where they're at. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out on a very cold and rainy and warm night to hear from and honor one of the greats in the community. After 37 years of work as a teacher and an administrator, Sidney Morrison retired in 2008 from the Torrance Unified School District, where he served as a high school history teacher, an English teacher, a middle school assistant principal, and a high school assistant principal, and an elementary principal. You did it all, huh? Yeah, elementary, middle, high school. God bless you. Ms. Morrison also served as the ACSA region president and member of the ACSA board of directors before becoming the ACSA state president in 1998 and 1999. He was awarded the ACSA Middle School Principal of the Year and the Marcus Foster Memorial Award for Administrative Excellence. He now works as a consultant and a coach of high school districts and offers training sessions in ACSA academics. As a Vietnam War veteran, he was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor for Under Fire in 1969. Thank you for your service, sir. Married with 3 adult children and 4 grandchildren, he is also a published novelist. A novel about Frederick Douglass will be published in February 2024. On behalf of my councilwoman, Sherry Kalani, who is here with us tonight, stand up before we bring. Mayor and my colleagues on City Council, it is indeed an honor to welcome you.
Welcome to the experience, and that is what it's going to be. You're not just going to hear me talk for 45 minutes an hour. I do want to engage you in the work that the league is asking you to engage in. I also want to thank the league for inviting me to have this opportunity to speak to you. So I want to offer my thanks, and I offer an expression of hope that this presentation will serve the league and the community. So I thank you for inviting me, with a brief reference to the connection that was made with my dear colleague, Pat Stomka, who contacted the league, who said that you may want to hear this man speak about his experiences. And so here I am to talk about my experiences. I want to let you know that it all began when the LA Times wrote an article about the Torrance. And because of that, I felt the need to write a book. And this is what I wrote. In the 1970s, I was the only Black teacher in Torrance, in a Torrance high school. In the 1980s, I was the school district's first Black principal. In 2000, I was asked by an older white man whether I enforced the school rule at a football game. Are they now hiring colleagues in Torrance? After 37 years, I happily retired from an excellent school district, and I received outstanding support from the Torrance PD, school resource officers. The students, staff, and families were overwhelmingly supportive, and many of my friends live in Torrance. Nevertheless, I was not at all surprised by recent stories about the racist messages shared by police officers. For years, I drove down Baltimore Boulevard, city's major thoroughfare, and noted only non-white men stopped by the police and sitting on the curb. I feared being stopped, but when I was stopped, only twice, I quickly mentioned my relationship to the school district and received cordial. Clearly, those perceived as outsiders were treated differently. Sadly, these behaviors and the grossest racist emails shared by authors reflect poorly on the community, but they raise a question that must be faced. Why in 2021 does racism persist? Echoing James Baldwin, I still wonder, why do some people need to hate others? That was the letter I wrote. Then I wrote another letter that I want to read when the president made a statement in reference to racism and white supremacy, that it was not American. And I wrote a letter to the LA Times, they printed on May 22nd, 2022. And I read this letter as a context for my perspective about the issue. At last, the president has called out white supremacy for what it is, a poison in the soul of this nation. But I must take exception to his insistence that this poison of hate and violence is not American. Sadly, it is American and has been a part of us since the beginning. When slaves were brought here to build the economy, when land was taken from indigenous peoples until they were almost wiped out. Waves of immigrants, the Irish, Italian, Jews, Asian, were all branded as invaders until we needed them as essential workers for jobs and wars. We exploited, we lynched, we massacred. And laws were passed to institutionalize white power. White supremacy has always been challenged by victims and their white allies, but these challengers were always demonized as disruptors and threats to the safety and security of their critics. Many were killed. Now and then, a decade or so here and there, Americans would rise and say, enough, we must change. And the results were the end of slavery, grants of citizenship, and the passage of civil rights legislation. But we must remember these as intermittent spasms of guilt and regret. The federal government didn't make lynching a federal crime until last year. And after every mass shooting, most of them perpetuated by white supremacists, there are thoughts and prayers and little else. As we wait for the next outbreak of violence and the nation flooded with guns. This spectacle is American. This is us. And they printed it. And I just wanted you to know that I am a writer and I use writing as a way to clarify my thoughts and the way I feel. And fortunately, I have a supporter in the editor-in-chief of the letters of the LA Times. Because what happened was, after the letter for the Torrance police was printed, he contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to be videoed and interviewed and have this interview posted online and on television. And so PBS broadcasted it. And so I was quite taken that it thought enough for them to come with their cameras and come into my home and ask me to talk about my experiences in the South Bay. So I'm here just to tell you that I'm here to talk about my experiences. And this marks the beginning of a conversation about race and racism, diversity, and inclusion. And I would like for you to consider this quotation because I come today, I think, or hope, with humility, because I don't have all the answers. And my experience is my experience, and I can't speak for you and your stories. And I hope that we'll have a chance, starting today, to hear your stories as well. But James Baldwin, my favorite writer, said something that I would like you to consider. So we can move forward. I want you to show something. That's me when I came to Torrance. And the students at South High School called me King Sid, and it stuck.
All right, next one.
And at the time, although I was the only Black teacher at the high school, I felt welcome and appreciated, and so I just wanted you to show this picture. That's what I look like if I got hired. And so today we're going to have an encounter, and that is an encounter where we know that we will talk with each other, we will share stories. So at the beginning of this experience, I would like you to take a moment and turn to a neighbor and just introduce yourself and say, hi, my name is. Let's do that, okay?
Dorothy, I love your name. I'm Gloria.
But I'm asking you to do this because when we know each other, we're more open to listening to our story. Never underestimate the power of a name. Never underestimate the power of a story. That is why I will insist that we never dismiss someone's name because it's too difficult for you to pronounce. Study the name. Ask the person how to pronounce it. I'll never forget one of my students at Howard Wood came up to me at fifth grade graduation, before fifth grade graduation, and said, Mr. Morrison, I've tolerated your mispronouncing my name for several years. This is how you say it. I really appreciated that. That's why in some of the high schools, they have competitions amongst the teachers for the privilege of pronouncing the names of students at graduation correctly. Because it is important to pronounce those names. Because the name represents history, it represents who we are. And if you want to also engage people, just ask them, tell the story of your name. What's your name? What's the history behind your name? So let me tell you about Sidney. I hated my name. I hated it because I was made fun of. And I was just, and I was a nerd. I wore glasses. I played the violin. So I was the poster kid of nerdiness. And so my name was Sidney, which was highly unusual in the 1950s in a New York Bronx neighborhood. And then I met a girl whose name was also Sidney. She insisted it was a girl's name. I insisted it was a boy's name. She said, let's fight about it. And we did, and she kicked my butt. I became from that moment sick. So when I came to Torrance, both of my friends and colleagues know me as Sid. But my wife is also here. She calls me Sidney. And after several years, I finally accepted that I'm Sidney and introduced myself as such. But we all have stories about our name, whether it's because we're named after our sainted grandmother, and we have one, and it's such a burden, or we don't like the sound of it, or whatever it is. But honor the name and allow people to tell the story of their name. So what we're going to do, today I've been asked to tell my journey as an educator in Torrance. And for me, that opportunity requires that I be rigorous in our self-examination of the family I love, and that's the Torrance family. That any claims to exceptionality, whether it's in a city like Torrance or in America, which I also love, I think Ken Burns is right. It requires critical self-examination. It's because we love it so much that we do this. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you to tell a story to each other. And so I'm going to give you directions about what you're going to do. All right? You are going to tell a story about when you discovered the power of difference. All right? It could be as when you were a child. It could be when yesterday. Can you go to the next? You'll see. So I want you to recognize the power story. I asked Laura, can I have an activity where people tell stories? She said, okay, but sometimes when people get an opportunity to tell stories, we can't shut them up. But that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. That shows that people are engaged. So never underestimate the power of story. So let's continue. And these and stories really reveal who we are, what matters to us. So I'm going to ask you to tell a story so that you can have a sense of everyone else in the room. I'm going to read, and this is what you're going to do in groups of 2 or 4. Depending on where you are. I prefer it be 4, but if you can't make it 4, that's fine. And you're going to tell what is called an I remember when story. So Gloria, if you can turn to the picture, you'll see a young lady kind of looking into her eyes.
Fun? No? Yes? This is the next one.
Okay, is that it?
Why am I me?
You can't
The next one is character.
get the next one. We have that one. Character, yes. Everything you say, everything you do leaves a story about who you are. That's why we tell stories. Okay, let's continue there. I remember when. I'm going to give you some examples so you'll know how you're going to do it. And you're going to tell a story, and it's going to be very brief. And you're all going to open with the line, I remember when. And in your group, you're going to hear them out. You are not going to interrupt. You're not going to ask any questions. You're just going to hear them out. And then after the stories are told, that's when you can talk in your group and ask questions about the story, right? So I'm going to give you some examples so that you know what I mean. I remember when my friend told me about the white-only fountains in Georgia and how I laughed at the absurdity of such a thing. I remember when I learned that the author of the Declaration of Independence was a slave owner. I remember when my Japanese-American friend in high school explained his support of the repeal of California's fair housing by telling the students in our government class that he believed that my mother's first reaction was not congratulations, but instead, now don't go marry some white girl. I remember when my father told me that his little mother, my grandmother, died as a young woman because when the nearest hospital the white-only hospital turned her away. She died before she could get to the nearest quote-unquote colored hospital. What I'd like you to do is to talk about discovering the power of difference. And it can be any kind of difference. It could be about gender, it could be about class, it could be about religion, it could be about anything where you recognize, either as a child or just yesterday, that difference matters. So take a moment and reflect. For example, I was talking to a high school principal in the east area of our county, and he was telling me the story about when he went to a well-known department store, and he's a Caucasian gentleman, and went up to the counter, he and his wife were there, and and this happened last week, and they were shopping for an event, and the clerk came up to him and said, "May I help you?" And his response was, "I wasn't here first, she was first," and he's pointing to the woman. And she said, "No, she's not here to shop." And he said, "That's my wife," and pointed to the woman who was of Latin heritage, that she was Mexican, American, and pointed to her that she is his wife, and you need to serve her first. But she was here first. And she said no. And he said, "Bring me a pair of scissors." She said, "Why? Bring me a pair of scissors." She wouldn't do it. He said, "Bring your supervisor here." Supervisor came. He said, "Give me a pair of scissors, please." And he said, and he handed the scissors, he took out his credit card and cut it in half. He said, "I will never return to the store ever again because what you did to my wife." And that happened fast. I'll tell you. But that's what I mean. It doesn't have to be ancient history. It could be something that just reminded you just today or last week, last year, that difference matters. For example, I talked to a young woman who was still upset that her father said she can't be a doctor because she's a girl. She can only be a nurse. Right? Those are kind of the stories that I want you to think about, because I want you to see it also is about many, many kinds of issues just beyond race. Okay, so let's do that. I'll give you 5 minutes. I see a lot of formations of twos and fours. Go to it, and I'll give you a signal when you're done. Okay. I hate to stop the discussion, but I hope that you took note of the impact of the opportunity to tell the story. So what we have to do as we pursue discourse about subjects that make us uncomfortable is that we need to know each other. And then also we need to be in spaces where we can tell our stories. And once we tell our stories, we make connections and people get further and further engaged. So when you do this work, never underestimate the power of story. But I hope in this activity that we had briefly this evening, you will realize something, that we're all different. We are all different, and therefore difference is universal. We have to get away from the idea that diversity is about them. Diversity is about ourselves, about you and me, because we're all different to someone else. And that we all want to be accepted. We all want to be included. We all want to be seen for who we are. And we all have the desire that people know us in ways that include us in whatever community we define. We all deserve belonging. We all deserve treating with respect. Unfortunately, this assumption of everyone is deserving of respect and dignity is not universal.
And therefore bigotry and racism prevails far too often in far too many places, because in hierarchies, in societies of difference, in societies that determine who is worth recognition and who is not, is the issue before us. Because in societies that determine its nature by determining who is worthy and who is worthless, is what we often experience in our lives in cultures that say, you're different, and therefore you don't get resources, or you're different, you deserve discrimination, you are different, and the consequence of that acknowledgement of difference is often a problem, because in some places difference is not celebrated, difference is tolerated. But I would argue we need to celebrate, because we are all different. Even if you go into a room where everyone looks alike, everyone is different anyway. Because some of those differences may not be by skin color, but they may be by class, maybe by religion, it may be by sexual orientation, or just your own preferences in terms of music and art. And yet we make assumptions about what people are by appearance. And so I want to read you something from a wonderful book. I'm always talking books, by the way. There's like an English teacher, always an English teacher. And this is a book called Cats by Isabel Wilkerson. And I think it will help you to understand what I'm trying to get at when it comes to societies who honor some groups and degrades other groups. And so let me read you a powerful passage from her book, Caste, and you'll see what I'm getting at. America is an old house. We can never declare the word over when we live in an old house. You may not want to go into the basement after a storm to see what the rains have brought. Choose not to look at it. Choose not to look at your own peril. The owner of the old house knows that whatever you are ignoring will never go away. Whatever is lurking will fester whether you choose to look or not. Ignorance is no protection from consequences of inaction. Whatever you are wishing away will gnaw at you until you gather the courage to face what you would rather not see. Like old houses, America has an unseen skeleton, a caste system that is as central to its operation as are the studs and joints that we cannot see in the physical building we call home. Caste is the infrastructure of our division. A caste system is artificial structure, fixed and embedded ranking of human value that sets the presumed supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other groups on the basis of exemplary, often immutable traits. A caste system uses rigid, often arbitrary boundaries to keep the rank groupings apart, distinct from one another, and in their assigned places. The hierarchy of caste is not about feelings or morality. It is about power. Which groups have it and which do not. It is about resources, which caste is seen as worthy of them and which are not. Who gets to acquire and control them and who does not. It is about respect, authority, and assumption of competence, who is afforded these and those who are not. In the American caste system, the signal of rank is what we call race, the division of humans on the basis of their appearance. In America, race is the primary tool and visible decoy, the front man for caste. What people look like, or rather the race they have been assigned or perceived to belong to, is the visible cue to their caste. It is the historic flashcard to the public of how they are to be treated, where they're expected to live, what kinds of positions they're expected to hold, whether they belong in this section of town or that seat in the boardroom, whether they should be expected to speak with authority on this or that subject. Race in the United States is the visible agent of the unseen force of caste. Caste is the bones, race is skin. Race is what we can see, the physical traits that have been given arbitrary meaning and become shorthand for what a person is. Caste is the powerful infrastructure that holds each group in their place. Caste is fixed and rigid. Race is fluid and superficial, subject to periodic redefinition to meet the needs of the dominant caste of what is now the United States. While the requirement to qualify as white has changed over the centuries, the fact that the dominant caste has remained constant from its inception. Whoever fit the definition of white at whatever point in history was granted the legal rights and privileges of the dominant caste. The subordinate caste, too, has been fixed from the beginning as the psychological floor beneath which all other castes cannot fall. So caste is not simply about power. Who's on top and who's on the bottom. Who we keep at the bottom so we define superiority. Which doesn't speak to the complexity of every human being, because we are all complex. There's something that you can go to now called complex identity. Yes, okay. We are all different. We are complex, and we are beyond the label. And if anyone says that by giving you a definition of identification of color, that speaks to who you are and the range of who you are and your history, that's when you can break the cycle and say, no, I am more than that. That, in fact, tells very little about who I am. And this happens even within groups. People come up to me in the gym and say, whoa, what about those Lakers? Number one, I don't play basketball. I don't like basketball. I go to the opera. I even fly to San Francisco. So why do you assume that I have something to say about basketball? Because the visual cue is supposed to identify your history, your character. And this is what I would like to read. Next line is from the Nobel Prize.
Sorry.
The same person can, without contradiction, be a British citizen, a Malaysian origin, a Chinese ancestry, a Christian, a liberal, a woman, a vegetarian, a long-distance runner, a historian, a school teacher, a novelist, an heterosexual, a believer in gay and lesbian rights, theater lover, an environmental activist, a tennis fan, jazz musician, and someone deeply committed to the view that there are intelligent beings in outer space, yet we often see Asian. That somehow saying someone's Asian identifies a physical element with very little else. And this is from Martin Sen, who was a Nobel Prize winner in economics. And even in schools, we do this. Here's another picture.
The next one?
Yes. Yes. The picture of the principal sitting at his desk, student enrolling, welcome to our school, pick a label. And we use these labels, and somehow that explains, everything that needs to be known about a child. And we know that's not true. Okay? So, another thing, I urge you to insist on the complex identity of each and every one of us. Be curious. Go beyond the label. Now, we do all have labels for the purposes of just, processing information, but go beyond the label. So, with all that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you the story of my coming to Torrance and what I learned. So my story is a personal story. I'm not here to give statistics. I'm not going to necessarily give you references. There will be many times where people will come and tell you the statistics of what happened in Torrance. So I'm going to tell you the story of my journey. And I grew up without a heightened sensibility of race because my parents, who were products of the Jim Crow down from Oklahoma, left Oklahoma during the Great Migration to go to be New Yorkers. And so they never, ever talked. And that's sometimes I think something was missing, but they never talked about Jim Crow. They never told us about it. It was if they, turned their back. And so I did not have a heightened sense of being, I said I had a heightened sense of being different because I played the violin and I wore glasses, but not because I was Black African American. When my father was passing away from cancer, before he passed away from cancer, he started talking about his past, which he never did. And I regret that. But he told me the story of his mother dying on her way to the hospital. And I asked him why he never told me the story. He said, I'll never forget it. I didn't want you, your brothers, and your sister to grow up in Haiti. Haiti never did any good. So that was my history. And so when we encountered discrimination in Texas on the way to California, I got into an argument with my mother because they came out from the restaurant and said, well, we can't eat here. And I said, why? And they tried to explain, well, the Jim Crow law. And I said, that's ridiculous. Just look the way we look. We're wearing, shorts and tank tops. Because in New York, you never go to a restaurant dressed like that. And so I just assumed that was the reason why we were being turned away. Then we went several miles later and we got to a gas station. And again, it happened. We were turned away because it was a white-only gas station. And I got into an argument again. And then when it happened the third time, I realized that this was an issue for a lot of people. And I had lessons to learn. I sometimes look back, should my father have told me more? But each parent has to make a decision when and where.
I'm sorry.
And so and that's the context in which I came to Torrance. I was usually the only Black kid in my AP honors classes. I was usually, when I went to UCLA, classes of 400, I'd be the only Black student. But I wasn't uncomfortable. If I knew I was smart. Anyway, and I could compete. And so I wasn't self-conscious about it that much. Except that when you're singular, you seem to notice. So I was my very first year as a teacher was at Compton High School, and I was there for a year, and I left. And I left because it was dangerous. And it's unfortunate because the kids were so great and they wanted to learn history. But on the day that a kid pulled a gun while I was on bus duty, not at me, but on another student, and I dived to the ground. And I remember thinking, I survived Vietnam for getting killed at bus duty. At this school, no, I'm leaving. So I left. And I applied to wherever. I sent applications all over. And I got this call from Torrance. I can honestly tell you, where's Torrance? And so I went down to Torrance. I went down to West Torrance. I went down to West High, got interviewed, and was hired. When I told my brother, my youngest brother, that I got hired by Torrance, his reaction was, what? Do you know how Torrance is? Don't you know that Black people are not welcome in Torrance? What are you doing? That was the reputation, which unfortunately is something that some of you have already heard. And my brother's first reaction what's that? You should go to Torrance. Well, I said, I need a job. So I went down there and I got hired. And then I want to tell you about my first day on the campus when I was at the first faculty. And remember, I looked like, on that day, I was dressed in a suit and I was lined up with other new teachers, and one of them was sitting in this room with me. And we've been dear friends ever since, but I'm sure she remembers that moment. Because it's one of those, sometimes you have these clarifying moments and you're standing there and the principal of the school at the time was introducing the new teachers and he said, "This is Mr. Morrison, formerly of Compton High School. But don't worry, he speaks like he came from Harvard." And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, what am I into? And I distinctly remember the front row of the teachers because more than 20 years later, I came back, 30 years, I came back as principal of that same high school. And there were veteran teachers who were still there, who were at that meeting. And they came up to me and said, "Do you remember when?" And the slinking in the first row, everyone slinked back, horrified. But it happened. And so that was my introduction to Torrance as a community. And I have to tell you that the principal transferred me a year later. He never told me why. I learned about it the first day of the second year of school. All the students had blindly signed up for my classes. Packed, all were packed, but I was sent to another high school. And so I left that high school, and then I went to West High School and South High School, and I was the only Black teacher there. And I taught government, I taught U.S. history, and I taught English. And I also encountered a principal who mentored me and who encouraged me to become a school administrator. So shout out to Joseph Roger. But there are some things I want to tell you about my experience at South. Only a few events do I recall that made me self-conscious about being there. And the first one, discovering that there was an event there at that school called Slave Day.
Ooh.
Yes, Slave Day. And students had the opportunity to bid for students. Some people's mouths have just dropped open.
Oh.
I have evidence of it in a yearbook that following year. And students had an opportunity to bid for students who usually were either football players or government leaders, so that they could essentially order them around for the day and raise money for student body. So it was a fundraiser activity. And because the students were in my class, they came to me and said, "Mr. Morrison, there's this school event, and we know that slavery was really sort of mistreatment and degrading people, but we have this event and we don't know what to do." And I said, "Slave Day? I need to go down and see this." And I did. And I said, "Well, I decided not to make an uproar about it. I just was curious." I said, "Well, it's temporary. Can't we call it Indentured Servitude Day?" And they said, "Yes, we could do that, but it's already in the works." But it was the students who came back to me and said, "No, we're not going to do this anymore." Because, and again, that was very empowering the students to recognize that they had a tradition. I don't know how long that, that tradition was at the school. But the students took the responsibility to say, no, we can't do this, so they stopped. And I really appreciated that. I remember a time when I went to lunch one day and I came back and the student on the door of my classroom was a full door poster of the KKK. And my students were, yes.
Do you think these experiences would have been had if you chose to stay at Compton? I'm having an issue in hearing you choose to leave a school in which folks look like you
Yes.
to then relocate to somewhere where,
Right.
using your resources that you were gifted enough to get provided to your family and pulling it from a marginalized community to go serve in a community, then you're up here complaining about it. I'm confused.
Okay, I'll tell you that because I'll speak to that because that happened to me at a
Because you
meeting.
think,
That happened to at a meeting. I went back to Compton.
and then you said you recommended it be called indentured servant.
Yes.
I'm so happy those students have more agency to say non-existent.
But I do want to speak to what you just raised, okay? Because that happened to me. I went back to Torrance. I went back to Compton. And a gentleman challenged my choice to come to Torrance. And he said, those students, you should have stayed. And my reaction to him was, you have no right to be the identity police and tell me how to live my life.
Fact.
If you chose, let me finish, please. If you choose to stay, and I struggled with it, I must say I struggled, but I left. And I decided that maybe I could serve those children here in Torrance by being a model of Black authority that they've never
And you have
experienced.
no
before.
right to say that you're the model of Black.
I'm not.
So that's the identity.
When I use the word model, I don't mean to suggest that I was a perfect person.
Right.
What I'm saying is that I had to come to terms with the role I was giving to myself. And I chose to be that person for the students who would never have experienced a Black teacher or a Black principal. And that was the choice I made. And I'm saying that each person makes their choice. And it was with misgiving, but I decided that I was going to do this, and I did. And I do not regret it, because I chose willingly to come and be someone that most kids never experienced before. Sometimes kids would come to my class and openly say, they never had a Black teacher before.
But
So I'm saying to you that I am not here to defend my choice to you. I'm only here to explain what I live. And I prefer that each of us have an opportunity to tell their story as to why they did and not be shamed into believing that their choice is somehow unworthy.
right, never shaming. Never. Simply saying on a strategic line, you identify that we are more than one identity.
That's right.
So therefore, those students in Compton could have had more than just a Black teacher in you. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
Oh,
Yeah,
and I said, I left it with regret, but I left.
just clarifying my position. No
Okay.
shame, just definitely clarity needed because I'm highly uncomfortable in the delivery.
Okay, well, I am sorry about that. But I do not I do not own that I need to feel uncomfortable about my choice because you feel uncomfortable about my
Right, and I
choice.
don't own that I have to feel comfortable.
And you don't.
So, and that's different, it's universal, where she
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
so that's the
And
thing.
I get that.
Thank you for even hearing me, because I did interrupt, but I was highly, and still am, so that's the point. Thank you.
And if you are willing to talk with me afterwards, I'd be glad to talk with you. Okay. So let us continue. I want to talk to you about the students because they were so outraged that this had happened. They were more upset about it than I was. But nonetheless, those are the only two instances of where I felt uncomfortable about being at the school. Although I do remember another time when a student said to me in class, "Mr. Morrison, where do you live?" And snappishly, I responded, "Do you ask your white teachers that?" And his face just sunk. And I realized that he was just trying to get to know me. But I gave that question a negative implication, and I apologize for having answered his parents. But again, sometimes if you are either marginalized or you're in a situation that are uncomfortable, sometimes you find yourself being triggered. And that, I think, comes from an acknowledgement that I would like to address, is that when I grew up, when I came here to Torrance was even then overwhelmingly white. There were not even that many agencies. Yeah. And the 405 was like the Great Wall. It really was. And in some cases, Hawthorne Boulevard was another wall. So there was this, sense there's the other, on the other side of the freeway, because people lived in the South Bay and rarely went out of the South Bay. And then there was Hawthorne Boulevard, where there was the west side of the city and then the east side of the city. And there was a sense of caste even there. So, but one of the things that also happened is that students saw me very differently in a way that I just want to speak to. And that was, I caught a student doing a caricature of me. And she had a little face of mine, she had a little circle of my face, and then a giant afro around it. And I was quite amused by it. I didn't see it as an insult. And I said, "May I have that?" She said, "Okay." And I put it on the bulletin board. And that started a contest amongst the students to such a degree that by the time I left South High, I had thousands of bids. There were celebrations of how they imagined me in different ways. Now, I tell you this, not as and even the principal brought visitors to see this, my classroom. To me, it was not a celebration of me. It was a celebration of student creativity. And my willingness to honor that they saw me humorously, and I put it on the wall. And a couple of kids did an entire series about Mr. Morrison. And this is, by the way, one of my favorites. This was a pastel done by a student that was so beautiful, in my opinion, I had it framed. And I have it in my office. And it reminds me that, students are creative and that they help me to see myself in multiple ways. Again, an affirmation of complexity. Okay. So here we are. I would like to continue. As I was driving to high school, I would often, as I said, see people on the street, on the curb, in black and brown, and wondering when I would be stopped. And I was stopped occasionally, but by then I had an ID and that showed that I was a member of the community. And so I became a principal eventually. And it was a middle school in Torrance, the first middle school where there were a variety of students. And then and I was standing in front of the school, and usually sometimes I was dressed casually. And people would come up to me and say, "Are you a custodian?" And it happened so often I decided I was going to wear suits most of the time. I do remember one incident where a student came to me and said, "Can we have a basketball tournament?" And I said, "What kind of tournament?" He said, "The Koreans versus the Americans." And I said, "But we're all Americans." "No, we're not having a Korean versus an American basketball tournament. No, we're not doing that." And so the teams need to be diverse, and they have their basketball tournament. But that was a beginning to get me a sense that there were other groups in Torrance that had issues. And when I went to Joseph Arnold as a principal, because I asked to go to the elementary school, I went to a PTA meeting and literally an argument broke out between the Japanese parent and the Korean parents over their celebration weeks, and they were trying to outdo each other. And I was stunned. And I just stopped the meeting and I drew a circle and said, we're all one family here. And we're only going to have heritage week. And we're going to have everyone celebrate their heritage. And I'm recommending that what we do is create these dolls. And there's some people from Arnold here who remember that every person on the campus, including the adults, made these dolls to celebrate their heritage, where they came from. And they were all posted in the cafeteria. And then I went to another elementary school and we put them in the hallways. Because I wanted everyone to, I remember a woman said, coming up to me saying, I don't have a heritage. I said, what do you mean? The white woman. She came and said, I'm from Oklahoma, I don't have a heritage. I said, yes, you do. My family's from Oklahoma, you're from Oklahoma, let's celebrate, that too. And my point is that we have a cause for celebration from from wherever we come. Now, eventually, I left the elementary school because I was asked to go to high school. And that's where I was confronted by someone during a football game. And at the time, it was a Friday night, dressed in my suit, just making sure things were okay. And I get a call from one of the campus security. Mr. Morrison, please come over. This man he wants to cross the field. And I said, no, he can't cross the field. So I'll come over and speak with this gentleman. And he apparently made quite a ruckus. And so I went over to him, and the campus security said, sir, this is Mr. Morrison, our principal. And that's when he said, so they're hiring colors in Torrance now. And I paused. And I thought, I am not going to let this go. So I said, yes. And this head Negro is telling you, you are not crossing the field. And I don't know what he expected, that he was going to refer to me as the colored principal, and I was going to let him cross the field. But I reacted, he stepped away, and I thought, ooh, I'm in trouble. I'm going to get a call from the district office because I called back. Nothing happened. My point is that most of the time, I did not do that. Even when I got asked, are you the principal, are you campus security? Literally, people would ask for the principal, and I would come out and they would say, whoa! And I said, hi, I'm Mr. Morrison, welcome to our school. So for me, my goal was to create awareness. Even if they had behaviors like that. But every once in a while, you have these revenge fantasies, or you want to smack them down because they're so insulting. And I did that then. But that was not my regular pattern. Because humiliation and shame-based decisions or fear-based decisions, I would argue, don't usually have transformational results that are good. So even when people try to demean me, I felt like, okay, let me try to make an ally of this person. And every once in a while, I reacted snappishly or angrily, because I'm human too. So I will continue on, and I want to talk to you about going to West High School. And I'll never forget a basketball game. And ironically, the high school that we were playing, that West High was playing, was Torrance. And I was not there at the beginning of the game because I was at a memorial for a very good friend. But I got a call from my assistant principal that Sid, you need to come on back to the basketball. This is bad. I said, why? Some of our students are showing monkeys to the kids and their parents. I said, what? So I came back to the high school and immediately sat in the stands with the other kids. Because I thought, is that how they think of me, their Black principal? But I needed to do something to stop this behavior. And then I realized I had to call the Torrance police. And I called the Torrance police, and because I've had a relationship with the Torrance police, they came. Because I said, you need to come, because if you don't, there might be a racial incident at this high school. And I don't think anyone wants to read about that in the Daily Breeze or the other time. So please come. And they came. And then I said, we need to secure this game. So I don't want anyone from the home team to leave until every adult and student is on those buses going back. So will you help me? And they did. They went across the gym and declared that this is a safety emergency, spoken with Mr. Morrison, and we are not going to allow anyone on the home side to leave until everyone gets on the bus. I was so appreciative of Torrance for doing that. And the next morning, the principal of that high school was really hot. She let me have it. I apologized. I called in. I found out who the kids were. And they were banned from any future events. But their parents were mortified. But you have to ask yourself, how did those kids learn that? What happened to make them eventually do that? And I'll tell you a story of my time at elementary school, where a little boy came into the office and he said to the secretary, looking at a portrait of a gentleman on the wall, by the way, Dr. Howard Wood. And he, white man with glasses, white hair, looking very severe on the wall. And the little boy said, is that, he asked the secretary, is that Mr. Morrison? And I heard that and I came out and I said, no, and I went down to he was first grader. And I said, no, this is that's Dr. Wood. See? And I realized something. What was most important were the glasses, the image of power on the wall. That's what he saw. My race, the skin color, he could obviously see it, but it was not important to him to make a judgment about even my identity. And what I'm saying is, children learn the signals about color that makes it either something to fear or something to not be concerned about. And so one of the things that I want to advocate is to recognize that a racist is educated to become a racist. There are things that are triggered in the life of a child that makes them have certain ideas about race. If, for example, you're a parent and you're walking down the street and you see someone who's different and you get tensed up and you grab your child's hand, that signals to the child, things not right here. Or if you see me walking down the street, which just happened, and the person who sees me coming crosses the street, that signals to a child they need to have an issue, they're going to have an issue, or should have a sense of who is important, who's the fear, and all the rest. So the good news is that people learn triggering systems
but they can also unlearn them too. And so that's why the work that the league is doing is very important. That's why education is so important. That's why I'm very upset that there are places where history is being banned. Words can't be used. Certain books can't be read. Because it's important that we signal to students that there are things that you should know that can broaden your horizon. So, what do I recommend? There are some suggestions I can make. But before I do that, I want to read a letter, I want to read something that a student wrote about me. And I only read this, again, not to glorify myself, but to help all of you that the kids are watching. They're watching what we stand for and what we represent. And I want to talk about representation, because often representation is when you are the only one, sometimes you need to be represented, you don't want to be. And I chose to be that first person. However, other people may see it. But there is a burden as well as a responsibility. And in fact, when I was selected as principal, the superintendent at the time, before I was to the board, said to me, "Now don't mess this up." I almost said, "You tell that to the right people that you select by English." But I was very aware that when you are the first, you tend to have the responsibility of being successful, because often in caste systems, if you fail, the group fails with you. And in caste systems, if you're in the dominant group and you fail, it's your individual failure. It's not the group's. So I was aware of that. And so I almost felt insulted that I was reminded of this. But I didn't say anything. But I became really intensely aware when I was principal here in Torrance that sometimes, even if you choose to embrace your being the first, that there is a burden as well. So, and this is a part of the talk that sometimes we have with our children. So when I was really self-conscious about this, I wrote a letter to my son. And I wrote this: "I know that as I walk the streets, as I move about in offices and concert halls, conclusions are being drawn. This is the fate of all minorities in a segregated society, when there's little personal contact at the dinner table of the neighborhood environment. But I want my foolishness to be mine, not yours. I want your triumphs to be yours, not mine. We are not representative men. We are three individuals who share a family, a house, a history, and a culture, and we should mutually support each other. But we are not free to become ourselves, as we must always worry about the race. Some will say that this plea for the individual is precisely our problem, that a reflection of the difference that destroys communities and eviscerates the brotherhood. I disagree and argue that communities cannot flourish if individuals feel alienated, fettered by the expectation of others, unable to be true to their own talents, dreams, and opinions. As Ralph Ellison once observed, our task is that of making ourselves individuals. We create the race by creating ourselves. And then, to our great assumption, we will have created something far more important. We will have created a culture. So I wanted to address that whether we want to or not, we are going to be judged. So we have to be careful about what we say, what we do. And sometimes it's a burden that you don't want to carry. Why can't someone else
Why do some people be free to make their mistakes and be just simply judged as being an individual making their mistakes? But in a caste system, that's not often possible. You're made to be, to carry the shoulders of everyone else. And that's unfair, but that's what caste systems do. So I just wanted to warn my sons to be aware of that. And so I want to get back to this essay that I found out that one of my students, after graduating from Harvard and going to Berkeley, had a class where he had to write an essay about a leader who represented inclusion and equity. And he wrote about me. And he called me up years later saying, "Hi, Mr. Morrison, do you remember me?" He was the one who explained to me how to pronounce his name. How could I forget this kid? And so he said he wrote this essay as an assignment. And again, I say this not because somehow I'm this glorious person and I'm praising myself, but it reminded me how important what we do as adults to children, what children see, because they make conclusions of what we stand for. And I was fortunate enough that this young man who's gifted in writing wrote an essay and shared it with me and called me up and said, "I wrote this letter, wrote this essay, I'd like to share it with you. Can we meet for lunch?" And this is what he wrote. Partially. Every single Monday morning, I knew I would wake up to witness the best cheerleading performance of my life. For those who don't know, I was a cheerleader at my schools, and I literally wore pom-poms and called out the school name, and they would shout it back. I did this at Arnold and at Joseph and at Howard. Every single morning, I would wake up to witness the best cheerleading performance of my life. My principal knew that this heart out there. Our school model was a school of the heart, and Mr. Morrison truly practiced what he preached. And no, I'm not just talking about his elaborate, multicolored pom-pom performances. Mr. Morrison broke stereotypes for what it meant to show spirit. Many people feel cheerleading to be an activity reserved for girls, but because of Mr. Morrison, I never grew up thinking that way. He would build up a great sweat, jumping and dancing and screaming for us as he answered the shouting letter of our school's name to him. We wore back our response. It was empowering to know that someone cared so much about all of us, that he was willing to go through such intense physical effort. Mr. Morrison had a knack for welcoming people with open arms. Kindergarten was not an easy transition for me. Both my parents are immigrants. Like me, they were gradually getting acclimated to the school. But Mr. Morrison did something to make us feel special and desirable for our differences as opposed to being on the project. Every year, I remember the multicolored doll project. These dolls were not our only visual display. There was a beautiful mural outside the cafeteria, and I would pass by this illustration every day. Mr. Morrison would refer to this illustration in our weekly assemblies because it depicted tons of people from different racial, cultural, and ethnic backgrounds, all smiling, holding each other's hand, and standing tall in unity. He wanted it to be an example of relationships that we develop in our own lives, and he emphasized that new friendships outside our own heritage would be monumental in adding depth to our humanity. He also said that Mr. Morrison made us feel that we were all his children. That brought me tears to my eyes. Now, it means that my message to you as adults is that you can change the perception of children if you choose to be aware of what you stand for and what you would like for them to know about you and what the world you want them to become. So I end my talk this evening with referring to a couple of people. We go to the end, Gloria. We are planting seeds. That's why I have that picture. And we plant, and sometimes it takes a long time. But the seeds eventually grow into a beautiful garden. That's an egg. And that's a beautiful garden. They are waiting. They are waiting. And because they are waiting, I want to end with this reference to some people who have been inspiring to me. That is Robert Kennedy, who said, each time a person stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each form a million different centers of energy and daring. Those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Next. And this is something that I'll never forget, because this was something that Marian Anderson said. There are many persons ready to do what is right because in their heart they know it is right. But they hesitate waiting for the other fellow to make the first move, and he in turn waits for you. I want to end with this image of Marian Anderson, who on Easter Sunday, 1939, spoke before the Lincoln Memorial after she had been denied the opportunity not only to speak at Constitution Hall, but also was denied the opportunity to perform at the high school in the District of Columbia. And Eleanor Roosevelt arranged for her to sing a concert before the Lincoln Memorial. And she opened up her concert after she had this experience with "My Country, 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty, of Thee I Sing, land where my father died, land of pilgrims fly, from every mountainside, the freedom land." Despite how she was treated, I have learned from my heritage that you can be critical of the nation you love. Because then so many, including my father and mother, love the nation, we didn't love them back. And Marian Anderson loved the nation, even though she was mistreated so publicly. And so I say to you, in your journey of criticizing, examining Torrance and its history, embrace that you love it. Embrace that you love it, that you care about it. But have the courage to be brave, ask questions, tell stories, be vulnerable, accept your biases, we all have them. Ask questions, tell stories, but most importantly, be brave. Be brave. Thank you. Might be some questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we get question cards?
Well, people got cards. Does anybody have any questions they'd like?
Well, these are questions like, what is your favorite book? And I think of my favorite book that I go back again and again. I can tell you that it's The Fire That Inspires. It's a call to action that is so eloquent, so inspiring. And it started as a letter to his nephew. Well, any book by James Baldwin, if I was forced to choose, it would be the book that he wrote in 1963, The Fire That Inspires. The answer to that question. What is your favorite movie? I don't go to the movies that often. I like to read more, but if I was forced to read, to choose a movie, I think it would be In the Heat of the Night. And I know why. Because of that scene when Sidney Morrison slaps the wife.
Yes.
Because it was kind of an expression of, at a certain point, you had it. And, you always meet a gentleman, and Claudia represented, his name was Sidney, and he represented, class and, and style and reserve. But at a certain point, it was like, pow, call me Mr. Tippett. And so I go back to that movie just because it every once in a while it's a powerful lesson that sometimes bullies only understand an event like that, because bullies are counting on our silence. They're counting on our complicity. They're counting on looking the other way. And so I encourage people to recognize that bullies are cowards. Hatred is the coward's revenge for being intimidated. That was not me. That was George Bernard Shaw, another one of my favorite fighters. But it was an insight to me that bullies are afraid of people they victimize because they pose a caste threat. They pose the sense that, I have to be better than you. And the only way that I can be better is make sure that you are low. And so therefore, when people stand up to people like this, when you stand up to a bully, you do a survey. For the rest of us that will often want to stand up and react, choose not to choose. Unfortunately, after in thinking about it, the more we allow our silence to continue, the more we become complicit in the system perpetuating itself. That's why this conversation, this talk, this situation is so important. Even if we disagree, even if we do disagree, let's operate on the assumption that we all are worthy of respect and dignity, and they all have different stories. And sometimes I blow it. We all do. But if we assume that we're all in the struggle to become who we are, then we have a better chance. But I tend to like stories and books and movies about people who stand up against the tide. And we like to believe that we would be the one to stand up, But we also know that we want to comply, conform, and just get along. And sometimes that is the cost to ourselves, because we are coming to the people. We're saying we're going to let it continue. And therefore bless the Martin Luther Kings, all the others who stood up against the tide. Because at some point, we have to say no more. And that's what you're doing. We're going to try to say no more. I want the day to come where when people say Torrance, they don't react like my brother. Yes.
All right, everybody, please. Make some quick remarks. I know the evening's getting long. I don't talk very long. You know, not a big talker. I did want to take a moment to honor our most recent past president, Pamela, who I mentioned earlier. Now she's here. 2018 to 2022. Your tireless efforts led our lead through our turbulent times during COVID. And I know this was a conversation you wanted to get started, and I'm so glad we can start it now that you let us. And we would be much worse for where Pamela hadn't been walking us through the darkness of COVID. Thank you so much, everybody. We do have some partners. There's one here tonight, Marietta Fong from the Interfaith Council. So if you can hit the stage bar. Did you want to speak just a few words just to let everybody know a little bit about the Interfaith Council?
Say we're tremendously grateful to the League of Women Voters for initiating this effort. The South Coast Interfaith Council has been part of the community for 70 years. Started out as an ecumenical group and then expanded to include faiths of all kinds. And our mission is to create understanding, respect, harmony, and to celebrate the diversity. And as Sidney said earlier, to celebrate the differences that we have. So we would be thrilled to be partners in this endeavor, and we're very, very grateful. So thank you tonight, and we're looking forward to doing more. And we would invite you all to take a look at what we've done as the South Coast Interfaith Council, and to invite you also to our 70th annual assembly soon.
Great. Okay, so closing survey, this is your exit survey. This helps us know a little bit more about you and what your interests are. We'd love to hear from you. We have the department, the business cards for if you'd like to share your information with the Attorney General of California. They're going to be handing out the business cards, and then they'll be collecting the stories. We have this short survey. Here's the big thing, right? So in order for us to continue to do this important work, we would love to have you join our membership. So if you're not already a member of the League of Women Voters, we have all sorts. This event tonight is part of because members came forward and said, I'm interested in hearing about this. But if you go outside, you'll see we also have some flyers out there for all different kinds of events and all different kinds of topics, because they all come together with the type of work that we're doing. We'd love to have more members help us continue this great work, so please consider joining. And thank you all for coming tonight. It's so wonderful.